Okay, now we have bathing suits on the wall. I have everyone's attention. That's good. You see, because the thing is, Michael, given the weather and the time in that we are approaching dinner, even if I could deliver you an answer to "Is there God?", the only eagerly awaited sentence in my presentation would be "in conclusion." That's the way it goes at this hour. So, but this I think should do the work. We are going to address it very soon. Thank you first, Sharon and Michael, for organizing this fascinating conference. I want to open just with two terminological clarification of terms that are often used in the discourse, and I don't think are always very well thought of. The first is Islam in Europe, which was already mentioned a number of times. The truth is, there is no such thing as Islam in Europe. There isn't really such a thing as Muslims in Europe. And I'll actually use Germany as an example. We have some 3.5 million Muslims in Germany. And they come from so many diverse backgrounds and have so many different inclinations that addressing them or even trying to analytically, academically understand them as one coherent group is almost meaningless. 2.5 of those 3.5 are Muslims of Turkish descent. Let's just now discuss them for a second. Just those 2.5 or 3.5 of just the German Muslim population. Those 2.5, some of them are secularists, some of them are traditionalists, some of them are devout Muslims, some of them are Sufis, some of them are Alawites. They're not really Muslims from the Orthodox Muslim way of thinking. Some of them are Shiites, some of them are Ahmadis, some of them most of them go to Ditib mosques, some of them go to the Milli Gurushma. So, in what sense is this a cohesive group? In what sense are there Muslims in Germany? But also when we think about this from the point of view of the European state, there is no such thing as Europe and Islam. Because the way religion, the place of religion in England, in the United Kingdom, in terms of state-church relations, its place in France and its place in Germany are really different. So Germany addresses Islam in a way that's very different to the way that England addresses it or deals with it, and that's also true for France. The other point, terminological point that I think has to be clarified is integration. Often the word integration is used by Europeans where they actually mean assimilation. And these are two very different sociological terms. Assimilation, by its classical definition, is the process in which one loses one's memories, identity, and patterns of behavior and absorbs those of the host culture. Integration is merely the process where you engage with a society that you were not connected with before, that you segregated from before. These are not the same things. And often when Europeans say we'd like to see some Muslim integration, what they really mean is we'd like the Muslims to assimilate. We'd like the Muslims to become like us. That's not integration, that's assimilation. What I would like to do in this presentation is to challenge, or at least to show you how complicated some of the notions we have on Muslim integration are, how almost anything can be seen, in fact is seen by different people in different ways. And let's start with the question that you addressed, which is why is there European anxiety, such European anxiety about Islam? So demography is one answer, but I don't think it's really a conclusive answer. Why the fact that there are more of them shouldn't make us anxious. It has to be something about that population. And then there is another obvious answer, which is terror. And I don't want to belittle that. I don't want to underestimate the gravity of the threat. Yes, there are Muslim groups, and there are Muslim individuals in Europe which breed acts of violence against European targets. Of course, that's an issue. But I want, in an almost provocative way, to suggest a different analysis, a different option. Maybe Europe doesn't really have a problem with Islam. Maybe its main problem is with itself, and with the fact that Islam, or some Muslims, force it to reflect upon itself in ways which are very, very inconvenient for Europeans. What do I mean by that? You know, Rafi, what you said about the gypsies, is it okay to say gypsies? Yes. I don't know, the Roma or the Romanians, yes, okay. You said that they are the ultimate Europeans in the sense that they can really belong everywhere. It reminded me there was a famous saying that the only Austro-Hungarians were the Jews. Because the Austrians were Austrians, the Hungarians were Hungarians, but the Jews could fit either way. In a sense, Muslims provided European identity with an opportunity. And I noticed when I do field interviews, the only people I meet who say we are Europeans are sometimes Muslims. Because always the minority finds in the broader framework something to identify with. But that implies that European identity is something that was never really settled. What does it mean to be a European? What is Europe? For example, is Christianity part of European identity? And I give you just one example of the kind of challenges, issues that Islam puts forward to European states, European governments, and without Islam possibly would not have been challenged. When Europeans today celebrate Christmas, what are they celebrating? I know it sounds like a very silly question, but Christmas is a big deal, isn't it? What is it that Europeans celebrate? Is this a religious holiday? Is this a traditional holiday? Is this a commercial holiday? Is this just a big festival of lights? Well, there is no answer to that in European laws or constitutions. And the reason why this has been avoided is that different segments of societies have very different ideas about it. For some, it's a very religious holiday, and for some, it's an absolute commercial, secular thing. But sometimes it's best not to answer questions. Sometimes socially, it's best to avoid questions. But then you live in Birmingham, and the city council puts a very big tree in the city square, and some Muslim representatives come forward and say, we don't want a Christmas tree. We don't want our taxpayers' money to finance a Christmas tree. Now, they say, you told us this is a secular society, this is a multicultural society. So if there is a Christmas tree, we want Ramadan lights and the whole list of things. City council has two options. First, you say, well, of course there's a Christmas tree. This is Birmingham. When you are an Anglican country. And Christianity is part of our heritage. And it can also come up with a different kind of answer saying, yes, you're right, we're actually a secular society. This is England, and we told you we're multicultural, so let's rid ourselves of all those Christmas trees. My point is that what some Muslim organizations do is force European governments to answer questions they don't want to answer, such as, what is the role, what is the place of Christianity in our societies? And that creates anxiousness more than anything else. To a bit of a different topic. What you see on the screen is called burkini. Burkini was invented in Australia a decade ago by a fashion modelist by the name of Aida Zanetti, Australian of Lebanese extraction. And I see you're all very impressed, so let me tell you there is also a Jewish burkini called Aqua Modesta, which became quite popular in the United States. The idea of the burkini was really quite simple. I'm not saying I could do it, I'm just saying the idea was simple. The idea was that in Australia the beach is a big thing, but Muslim ladies could not, you nod as if you've been there, so you know. Muslim ladies could not go to the beach because of immodesty. And the burkini, which is a combination, the word is derived from a combination of burqa and bikini. The idea of the burkini was to make it possible for Muslim ladies to go to the beach, to be like full Australians. We can call that integration, being an Australian going to the beach. The thing is, I don't think there are many things as the burkini which exemplify how integration can be perceived differently by different people. For many Muslim women, at least based on how many of these she sold, Mrs. Zanetti, for many Muslim women, this was actually the solution. Now we can go to the beach. or go to swimming pools, we have the burkini. That's, by the way, how the German court system sees it, because it very recently ruled, I think the highest administrative or constitutional, not constitutional, but administrative court ruled that because there is a burkini, girls have no excuse not to participate in swim classes.
Yeah.
But the thing is, in some European swimming pools, if you go with the burkini, they will not allow you in. They say there's not enough hygiene with this, so you have to wear something else. And for the majority of Muslim jurists, the burkini is not permissible, because under no circumstances can a Muslim woman swim with a Muslim male. Doesn't matter what she wears, even if she wears a tent. So we have one swimwear and three different approaches to whether or not it allows integration and what level of integration. Let me tell you a word about a very interesting place in Cologne. The first ever fitness gym opened for Muslim ladies. Now, it's not a fitness gym for ladies. This you have in Germany by the dozens, but it's a fitness gym for Muslim ladies, or at least a fitness gym that accommodates the needs of Muslim ladies, first and foremost, that under no circumstances are men allowed inside. Not the boyfriend, not the husband, not the milkman, not the technician. It's a girl's zone, and that is where it differs from the normal German lady fitness only. Now, this fitness gym is considered by its founder, a businesswoman by the name of Frau Aydemir, of Turkish extraction. She considers it as part of an integration process. And the way she explains it is that doing sports is part of German culture, and this woman would either go to her gym, at least for a start, or will not attend the gym at all. So they are becoming more German rather than less German because of her fitness gym. But if you read the German press around the time this gym was opened, it was described in mainstream press, not in populist press, it was described as an anti-integration move. The way it was understood. Even this aspect of life, which is not food, which is not prayer, just doing sports, even this aspect of life becomes secluded, become Muslim. So again, integration seen in two very different ways. Moving to religious law, I want to show you how complicated this is. Of course, I'm now oversimplifying something very complicated in a few sentences, but nevertheless, I think it's worthy. There are many texts, more than you can imagine, written by mainstream Muslim jurists. Mainstream Muslim jurists, not radical Muslim jurists, mainstream Muslim jurists, which all put forward a very simple equation. Why are there Muslims in Europe? What is the role of Muslims in Europe? Plainly put, to Islamize the continent, to convert non-Muslims to Islam. And when European audiences are made aware of this, the response quite obviously is one, to use the word you used again, anxiety. There are millions of people here who are trying openly, expressly, they're saying that. There are millions of people here trying to convert us. Now, again, I don't want to belittle that, and I'm not saying there isn't a fundamental challenge with this kind of theocracy, with this kind of theology that places emphasis not on integration as such, and not on assimilation, of course, not on being a good citizen, but why are you doing whatever you're doing in Europe? You're doing it because you're tasked with converting the continent. The point I want to make is that in practical terms, this is fascinating. In practical terms, the main pragmatic result of that theology has been the issuance of fatwas, of religious laws, which legitimize Muslim integration into the continent and allows concessions for Muslim everyday life in the continent. This sounds almost impossible, but that's the way it works. I'll give you just two examples. In Islam, of course, you cannot take a mortgage. You cannot go to a bank and say, I take a mortgage. You cannot take any interest-based loans. The European Council for Fatwa and Research made it permissible for Muslims living in Europe to take mortgages, and part of the equation, part of the reasons why it was permissible, was that unless Muslims live in nice homes, people would not wish to convert to Islam. The same logic was applied in permitting the service of Muslim soldiers in NATO forces in Afghanistan. Unless we, which by the way is a great taboo in Islam, the idea of a Muslim fighting a non-Muslim, fighting with non-Muslims against Muslims. But what was said by very formidable scholars was, unless we make it permissible for NATO soldiers to serve in Afghanistan, that is, unless we make it permissible for Muslims to fight against other Muslims, the course of dawah, the course of proselytizing to Islam, would be damaged. That is, we need, in a way, I'm saying something that sounds almost ridiculous, we need in a way to allow Muslims to kill Muslims in a way that the Quran does not permit, because unless they do so, people would not wish to convert to Islam. So again, you see integration in a very cyclical and possibly misunderstood way. My final comment, I want to say something about Judaism and Islam. And for most Israelis, I think for most European Jews, when they think of Islam in Europe, they think about it as a threat, just as many Europeans do. This is something I always hear when I speak to Israeli audiences, the Muslim conquest and how it will reflect on Jews and so forth. Something that's often neglected is the ironic fact that the future of Judaism in Europe today is entirely dependent on the future of Islam. Jews will only enjoy religious freedom if Muslims enjoy. France never legislated a law against hijabs, against headscarves. Never. What France legislated was a law against wearing visible religious artifacts in classrooms in public schools. Today you cannot wear the hijab, the headscarf, you cannot wear also a kippah. When some 3 years ago a German court, considering a Muslim case, or case of a Muslim, made it illegal for a while to circumcise boys, that affected Jews just as it affected Muslims. And the list goes on with halal butchering, which is basically kosher butchering, and with many other issues. The funny thing is, I don't think many Jews understand that, although they start to, but Muslims do. And there is considerable Muslim literature that parallels Jewish history and Jewish present to Muslim contemporary living in Europe. The concept of Muslims as the new Jews in Europe is actually quite a dominant concept in Islamic discourses on the future of Muslims in the continent. We don't have time to go into many details, but just to show you again how integration is an idea or a concept that can be understood in multiple ways, I'll give you two examples. One is a text by Saad el-Lawindi, who was the El-Ahram, the Egyptian El-Ahram correspondent in Paris for 17 years and now resides in Cairo. And he wrote the following: Muslims in Europe, he said, should learn from the Jews the method of successful and sophisticated integration. And he was going back to Mendelssohn and to the Enlightenment era. And he said something which, I say it in Hebrew because I think it's more well known in Hebrew. The Jews, he said, applied the idea of Ehyeh Yehudi beveitcha vegoy betzitcha. Be a Jew at home and a Gentile outside. And that's why they were successful in Europe, whilst maintaining their their Jewish identity. He said Muslims should do the same. However, he said Muslims do the exact opposite. They are Christians at home, or Westerners at home, they drink alcohol. Outside, they all become very Muslim. So he said they should reverse it. They should be Muslim at home and Westerners outside home, and that's going to be the secret for them to be as successful as the Jews were. Sheikh al-Qaradawi had a different idea. He looked at the same Jewish history and found a very different model of imitation. He said, yeah, we should do the exact same thing the Jews did. We should build our ghettos. We should have a ghetto. He meant, of course, the medieval ghetto. We should seclude ourselves in neighborhoods in which everyone is Muslim, and there is the mosque and the school and the restaurant and the dating club, and it's all Muslim. And if we do that as the Jews did, we will be able to preserve Muslim identity in Europe, while we have some leverage, some space for interaction. And of course we need the interaction, because without the interaction, however will we convert the non-Muslims? So these were just a few notions on how integration, which always seems such a clear-cut concept, is actually very complicated and can be understood in different ways. Thank you. Yeah, you take it?
Yeah, I take it.
Is it the equivalent of the kippah? And what Muslims said at the time was that no, it's a sign of modesty, which has many different dimensions, culture and so forth. The fact is, you were allowed to wear the headscarf in French schools until it was not an issue until 1989. It was an issue not because of the headscarf itself, but because for people like Ellen Finkelgott and others, this began to be perceived as a sign of Muslim encroachment on the laicite. So this goes back to your anxiety comment. It was about anxiety of what the headscarf represents, rather than the headscarf itself. I ask you a question, which of course we will not be able to answer, but I like to irritate German friends with that question. The obvious, you will answer it later also, so pay attention. The obvious thing said about the kopftuch, the headscarf, why it's wrong, is it's a symbol, it's a metaphor of women subordination to a male-dominated society. And that is correct, by the way, because what the headscarf means in Islam, it's a way of protecting men from the temptation of women. So it's all right. But if you think realistically about the bikini, not the burkini, is it really different?
I leave this question.